The campfire threw long, dancing shadows across their faces, faces hard as the rock they stood on. Their eyes were fixed on one man, Ethan Colt. He held two small children, his back pressed against the wall of the Red Rock Canyon saloon. He had nowhere left to run. A woman's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a whip. Her finger pointed straight at his heart. "That's him!" she spat. "He's the one! He's the one who let my brother die at Buffalo Creek!" Ethan felt the tiny weight of the infant, Emma, in his left arm. The boy, Daniel, clutched his leather vest, his knuckles white. "I didn't abandon him." Ethan's voice was low, a rumble in his chest. Gabriel fought to his last breath. The woman's face twisted into a mask of pure rage. "Liar!" A man shouldered his way through the crowd, leveling a shotgun. "Time to face justice, Colt!" The world exploded in a crack of gunfire. Blood sprayed across the weathered wood. But to understand how it came to this, we have to go back. Back 2 weeks, to an ocean of dust and shadow under the New Mexico sun. Ethan Colt stared at the horizon through a spyglass. He was a man carved from the land itself, 33 years of hard living etched into his face. Only his eyes moved, pale blue and restless, always scanning, always watching. He was a man who'd seen too many others die from a moment of carelessness. His horse, Ghost, stood silent beside him, a creature trained for the hunt. "He's down there," Ethan muttered, his hand touching the wanted poster in his pocket. Silas Blackwood, a monster who'd left 27 men, women, and children dead in the dirt at Copper Springs. The bounty would keep Ethan fed. But this wasn't about money, not anymore. This was about a debt paid in blood. 2 years ago, he was Lieutenant Ethan Colt, Army Scout, a leader of men. Then came Buffalo Creek, an ambush, a slaughter. When the smoke cleared, Ethan was the only one left breathing. He'd crawled to his captain, Gabriel Walsh, and watched the life bubble from his lips. "Find Rachel," Walsh had whispered, pressing his captain's badge into Ethan's hand. "Protect her. She knows." The words were a ghost that had haunted him for 2 long years. He'd searched for Rachel Walsh whenever the hunt for Blackwood allowed. But Blackwood always came first. Now, the trail was hot. He could feel it in his bones. As he rode into the valley, a chilling silence greeted him. No birds, no insects, just the wind moaning through the rocks. Then he saw them, wagons, scattered like a child's broken toys. It was a massacre. Men and women cut down where they stood. There were arrows, yes, Comanche arrows. But Ethan's trained eye saw the lie. Bullet wounds, too close for mounted raiders. Arrows stuck in bodies at odd angles, as if placed after the killing was done. This wasn't a raid. This was a stage play, performed with corpses. He was about to ride on when he heard it. A tiny, muffled cry. It came from beneath an overturned wagon. He found a woman's body, her arms stretched out, protecting something. He gently moved her, and his heart stopped. 2 children, a boy no older than 2 with wide, terrified eyes, and a baby girl, whimpering softly in her sleep. In the dead woman's hand, a crumpled, blood-stained note. The words were barely legible, but Ethan could make them out. Buffalo Creek. Run. Walsh knows. His blood ran cold. This was no coincidence. These people, this family, they were killed because of Buffalo Creek, because of the secret Gabriel Walsh had died to protect. And now, these 2 children were the only ones left. Sweetwater Creek, the nearest town, was a 3-day ride. Through hostile country, with Blackwood's men crawling all over it. Leaving them wasn't an option. Not after failing Walsh. Not when these children might hold the key to everything. He gathered them into his arms. The boy was stiff with fear. The baby girl blinked up at him with trusting blue eyes that made his chest ache. An old, scarred-over wound tearing open again. "Don't you worry," he said, his voice softer than he'd heard it in years. "I've got you now." He fashioned a sling for the infant, who he decided to call Emma. The boy, Daniel, would ride in front of him. He glanced one last time at the note. Buffalo Creek. It always came back to Buffalo Creek. The first night was hell. He made a hidden camp, but the children were a new kind of challenge. Emma was fussy, but the boy, Daniel, was a ghost. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't sleep. He just stared with those huge, solemn eyes. "Come on, partner," Ethan coaxed, offering a piece of jerky. "You gotta be strong." Daniel just turned his head away, his little lip trembling. Ethan sighed. He could track a man for 100 miles. He could live on snakes and cactus water. But comforting a child? This was a wilderness he didn't know how to navigate. He pulled out his revolver, the familiar ritual of cleaning it a small comfort in the vast, dangerous night. His mind drifted back to the faces of his men. Walsh, Rodriguez, Miller, good men, dead for a secret. A soft whimper brought him back. Emma was awake. He lifted her from the sling, patting her back awkwardly. To his shock, she settled against his chest, her warmth a strange comfort. She stared up at him with those blue eyes. And suddenly, he wasn't in the New Mexico territory anymore. He was 6 years in the past, staring into the eyes of his own daughter, Sarah. Before the fever took her. Before it took his wife, Mary. Before it took his whole world while he was off fighting another man's war. "You look just like her," he whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears. Emma's tiny fingers found his and curled around them, a simple, trusting gesture that squeezed the air from his lungs. A small movement caught his eye. Daniel had crept closer, watching. Hesitantly, the boy reached out and touched his sister's foot. "That's right," Ethan said. "That's your sister. You're a brave boy looking out for her." Daniel didn't smile, but some of the terror left his small body. He leaned against Ethan and his eyelids began to droop. Ethan sat perfectly still, a sleeping child on either side of him. The danger was real. The journey was long. But in that moment, with these two lives in his hands, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: purpose. "I won't let you down," he promised the sleeping children. "Not this time." By the third day, Ethan was at his wits' end. Daniel had a cough that was getting worse, and Emma was refusing what little goat's milk he had left. They were losing time, and the children were getting weaker. He stopped by a stream, trying to coax Emma to drink. She just turned her head and whimpered, her cheeks flushed with fever. That's when he heard it. Splashing. Downstream. A woman, washing clothes. His hand went to his gun. A stranger was a threat. Always. But she was alone, and she might have medicine. She might know what to do. He approached cautiously. The children held tight. "Hello there," he called out. "Don't mean to startle you." She spun around. She was younger than he thought, with sharp green eyes that took in the situation in a heartbeat. The trail-worn man, the gun, the 2 sick infants. "Those children need help," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a diagnosis. "Yes, ma'am," he admitted. She didn't hesitate. "Bring them here." Her name was Rachel Reed. A midwife, she said, on her way to Sweetwater Creek. Her movements were sure and practiced as she examined Daniel, applying a strong-smelling salve to his chest. "This will help his breathing," she explained. Then she took Emma. "She's dehydrated," she announced, producing a proper baby bottle from her satchel. She mixed diluted milk and sugar, and to Ethan's amazement, Emma began to drink greedily. "Seems you've got the magic touch," he murmured. "Not magic," she replied, her eyes sharp. "Just knowledge." She studied him. "These aren't your children." "Found them," he said. "Wagon train was attacked, made to look like Comanche." Something flickered in her eyes. "I'm heading to Sweetwater myself," she said after a moment. "The journey will be safer if we travel together, for the children." He didn't like it. He worked alone, but he was out of his depth. He needed her. "I should warn you," he said. "I might have people looking for me, not the friendly kind." Her expression hardened. "Mr. Colt, I'm well aware of the dangers of this territory, and I can handle myself." There was something in her voice, a steeliness that told him she was no stranger to trouble. "All right, then," he agreed. "For the children." As they made camp, he watched her. There was something familiar about her, but he couldn't place it. A midwife appearing out of nowhere, just when he needed her most. Coincidences made Ethan Colt nervous. In his world, they usually meant you were walking into a trap. The camp she chose was a soldier's position, defensible, good sightlines. Another detail that didn't fit the story of a simple midwife. They worked in silence, an unspoken rhythm between them. As dusk fell, she sat by the fire, humming softly to the sleeping children. Daniel's breathing was already easier. "You're good with them," he said, skinning the rabbits he'd caught. "I've delivered over 100 babies, Mr. Colt. You learn a few things. Most midwives I know don't double as traveling doctors." A flicker of tension. "Frontier life requires adaptability." She met his gaze. "Just as it's a long way from the army to bounty hunting, Lieutenant Colt." He froze. "Never said I was army." "You didn't have to," she said coolly. "You carry yourself like a soldier. And the wanted posters for Silas Blackwood mention a former army lieutenant is hunting him." She knew too much. "Why are you hunting Blackwood?" she asked. "There are easier bounties," she pressed when he didn't answer. "Maybe I like a challenge," he growled. She held his gaze for a long moment, then looked away. "I'll take first watch." "I've got it," he said. As she settled down to sleep, he knew she wasn't really sleeping. She was watching him just as he was watching her. Who was Rachel Reed? And what did she really want? Later that night, Emma stirred. He moved to adjust her blanket, and her eyes fluttered open. She gave him a sleepy, toothless smile. It was Sarah's smile. It hit him like a punch to the gut. When he looked up, Rachel was watching him. Her expression was unreadable. In that moment, an understanding passed between them. They were two broken people, haunted by ghosts, united only by their need to protect these children. She closed her eyes and finally, truly, slept. Ethan sat by the fire, humming an old lullaby his wife used to sing, a memory he hadn't allowed himself to touch in years. "You don't seem like a killer," Rachel's voice came quietly from the darkness. He turned. She was awake again, her green eyes fixed on him. "Appearances can be deceiving," he said. "Yes," she agreed. "They often are." Another long silence stretched between them, a silence full of things they weren't saying. "Sometimes," she whispered, looking into the flames, "the world doesn't give us much choice." "No," he agreed, "it doesn't." The next day they rode toward Sweetwater, but they met a traitor on the trail, a man named Jeremiah Tanner. "Heading to Sweetwater?" Tanner squinted at them. "Might want to rethink that. New mayor, man named Crawford. He's stirring up trouble, asking questions about Buffalo Creek, offering rewards." Ethan felt Rachel stiffen beside him. "We appreciate the warning," she said smoothly. "Is Red Rock Canyon a safe alternative?" "Quiet enough," Tanner said. "Sheriff there runs a tight ship." After the traitor left, Ethan turned to her. "You seem to know this territory pretty well." "I've traveled it for years," she said, her voice sharp. "Unless you'd rather ride straight into whatever this Mayor Crawford is planning?" He knew she was hiding something. But she was right. For the children's sake, they had to be smart. "Red Rock it is," he conceded. "But when we get there, you and I are going to have a talk." Just then, the sky opened up. Rain came down in sheets. A brutal, cold storm. "There's an old line cabin nearby," Rachel shouted over the thunder. "We can take shelter there." The cabin was small and dusty, but it was dry. They worked fast, getting the stove lit, wrapping the shivering children in dry blankets. As the cabin warmed, a fragile peace settled over them. "You should rest," he told her. She looked exhausted. "Daniel's fever might return," she said. He watched her tend to the boy, her touch gentle and sure. "Where did you really learn to care for gunshot wounds?" he asked suddenly. She froze. "What makes you think I know about gunshot wounds?" "The way you looked at my shoulder. You spotted the old injury right away." She met his gaze. "I was a nurse during the war, field hospitals. It was a good story, but he didn't buy it." Before he could press her, she stumbled, her hand flying to her side. He saw her wince. "You're hurt," he said. It's nothing. He stepped closer, grabbing her wrist. We're in the middle of nowhere with 2 children depending on us. I need to know if you're fit to travel. Their eyes locked in a battle of wills. Finally, she gave in. She lifted her blouse. A crude, bloody bandage was wrapped around her ribs. A knife, she said simply. 4 days ago, before I met you. Who? 2 men. They ambushed me outside Sweetwater. They asked about Buffalo Creek. They asked if I'd seen a woman and 2 children. She looked him dead in the eye. They described Emma and Daniel perfectly, Ethan. The pieces slammed together in his mind. The massacre wasn't random. These children were being hunted. Who sent them? They mentioned a mayor who would pay well. Her expression turned to granite. I left them with a lesson about what happens when you threaten a woman who served in field hospitals. So that's how she got the knife wound. She'd fought them off, alone. Suddenly, a horse approached the cabin. Ethan moved to the window, revolver in his hand. Get the children away from the door. A knock. Hello, the cabin! A man's voice called. Saw your smoke. It could be a lost traveler, or it could be them. Ethan opened the door a crack. A middle-aged cattle buyer stood in the rain, looking miserable. A man named Michael Jensen. Heading to Red Rock, Jensen said, shivering. He peered past Ethan. Didn't realize you had a family. He nodded toward Rachel and the children. The assumption made Ethan's skin crawl. Might want to know, Jensen said as he turned to go. That new mayor in Sweetwater, Crawford? He's offering rewards for an army deserter from the Buffalo Creek massacre. He meant Ethan, the sole survivor. After the man left, Ethan turned to Rachel. This is all connected. Crawford, Blackwood, the children. And us, she said. Gabriel Walsh's last words were a warning, Ethan said, his voice low. About Blackwood. Rachel's face went pale. Gabriel Walsh, she whispered. Captain Gabriel Walsh was your commanding officer. You knew him. She reached for a chain around her neck, a small silver locket. She opened it. Inside was a tiny photograph of his captain. Gabriel Walsh, she said, her voice trembling, was my brother. The world tilted on its axis. Rachel Reed wasn't her real name. It was Rachel Walsh, the woman he'd promised to protect, and she'd been hunting him. For 2 years, she confirmed, her voice like ice. Ever since they told me you were the only survivor, the man who left my brother to die. The accusation hung between them, sharper than any knife. Outside, the storm raged on. The silence in the cabin was a living thing. Ethan stared at the woman he had sworn to protect, a woman who believed he was a coward and a traitor. I didn't abandon him, he said, his voice rough. He pulled the tarnished captain's badge from his pocket. Walsh's badge. He placed it on the table between them. His last words were about you. Find Rachel. Protect her. He knew something, Rachel. Something about Blackwood. Something that got his entire unit killed. She stared at the badge, her composure finally breaking. She touched it, a tangible link to her dead brother. Gabriel sent me letters, she whispered. He thought someone high up was using army patrols to cover something up. Smuggling, maybe. 3 weeks before the massacre, the letters stopped. That's when they sent us to Buffalo Creek, Ethan finished. It was a trap. And these children, she said, her gaze falling on Emma and Daniel, are the only living links to what he found. The truth settled over them, cold and heavy. They were no longer just a man and a woman thrown together by chance. They were the keepers of a deadly secret, and they were being hunted. We need to get to Red Rock Canyon, Ethan said. I know a doctor there, Franklin. He was a friend of your brother's. It was a desperate plan, but it was the only one they had. As dawn broke, they rode south, a fragile truce between them. The woman who had hunted him for 2 years was now his only ally. The man she had despised was now her only protector. The irony was as bitter as the trail dust. The journey was tense. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. They finally reached Red Rock Canyon as the sun set, a town bigger and more civilized than Ethan expected. Rachel led him to a small clinic. A tall, gray-bearded man opened the door. Dr. Franklin. "Rachel," the doctor breathed, his eyes wide. "I feared the worst." He looked at Ethan. "And you must be Lieutenant Colt." Inside, the story came tumbling out. Franklin listened, his face growing grim. "You were right to come here," he said. "Sweetwater is Crawford's town now. He and Blackwood served together in the war, a unit known for profiteering." "And now they're working together again," Rachel said. "They're not just looking for you, Lieutenant," Franklin said. "They're looking for something specific, something they believe was taken from Buffalo Creek." "Evidence," Ethan guessed. Franklin nodded. Gabriel was meticulous. He would have documented everything. His eyes fell on the children, and their mother might have been his witness. The truth was a cold, hard knot in Ethan's stomach. These children weren't just orphans. They were carriers of a secret that could get them all killed. They were woken before dawn by the sound of horses. 3 riders, armed and moving fast. "Crawford's men," Franklin said grimly. "We have to go. Now." They fled through a hidden passage in the back of the clinic, racing out of town as shouts erupted behind them. Bullets whined through the air. They were being hunted again. They rode hard, pushing their horses to the limit, finally finding refuge in a hidden valley in an old trapper's cabin. There, Franklin spread out the papers Gabriel had sent him, field reports, supply manifests. A pattern emerged. Diverted wagons, altered patrol schedules, all centered around one area, the old Silverado mine. Blackwood and Crawford were using the army to protect their illegal silver smuggling operation, Ethan realized, and Gabriel found out. "There's more," Franklin said, opening Gabriel's journal. "He mentions a witness, a woman who saw them at the mine." "The children's mother," Rachel breathed. "But what evidence did she have?" Ethan asked. "There's nothing here that would stand up in court." Franklin pointed to the last entry in the journal. "The proof is hidden in plain sight, where only innocence would look." They all turned to the children. Daniel, who had been silent for days, toddled over to the bed where Emma lay. He reached under the blankets and pulled out a small, worn teddy bear. "Bear," Daniel said, his first word. Ethan took the toy. It seemed ordinary, but then he felt it. A small, hard lump inside, a seam along the back, stitched with newer thread. He pulled it open. Inside was not a map. It was something far more clever. A small clockwork music box. He wound it. A simple, haunting melody filled the cabin. A lullaby. Rachel gasped. "That was Gabriel's lullaby. He wrote it for me when I was a child." But Franklin saw something else. "It's not just a song," he said, his eyes gleaming. "It's a cipher, the sequence of notes. It's a key to a coded ledger Gabriel had kept. The full details of Crawford and Blackwood's entire operation. All they needed was the ledger itself, which Gabriel had hidden in a safety deposit box at the Sweetwater Bank. The music box was the key. "They think we have the ledger," Ethan said. "They'll never stop hunting us." "Then we end this," Rachel declared. "We take this to the federal marshal in Santa Fe." It was a desperate gamble. They would have to split up. Franklin would take the music box and the claim ticket for the safety deposit box to Santa Fe. Ethan and Rachel would take the children north, a decoy to draw Blackwood's men away. It was the only way. As night fell, a sound from outside sent a chill down Ethan's spine. A branch snapping. Someone was out there. They'd been found. They fled into the darkness, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. They rode like the devil was on their heels, splitting up as planned. Franklin veered east. Ethan and Rachel galloped north. 4 riders broke off following them. They were after the children. They were gaining. "There!" Rachel shouted, pointing to a rocky outcropping. "We can make a stand!" It was their only chance. They scrambled into the rocks just as bullets began to fly. Ethan laid down covering fire while Rachel huddled with the terrified children. The night exploded into a symphony of gunfire and ricocheting lead. They were pinned down, outnumbered. Then, a voice from the darkness. a calm, cultured voice that oozed menace. Silas Blackwood. "Lieutenant Colt," Blackwood said, stepping into the moonlight. "You've led us on quite a chase. Give me the children and the ledger, and you can walk away." Ethan knew it was a lie. Then the world turned upside down. Blackwood revealed his trump card. "Your friend, Dr. Franklin?" he sneered. "He's been captured, and we have the music box." It was over. Their plan had failed. The evidence was gone. "Now," Blackwood said, raising his revolver. "Just business." As his finger tightened on the trigger, another shot rang out. Not from Blackwood's gun. Blackwood staggered, a red flower blooming on his chest. His men fell one by one, cut down by a hidden force. From the shadows stepped a familiar face. Michael Jensen, the cattle buyer. Only now he wore the star of a federal marshal. "I've been tracking Blackwood's entire network for months," Jensen said. "And you, Mr. Colt, just led me to the top." Relief washed over Ethan, so powerful it almost buckled his knees. "Franklin?" Rachel gasped. "Safe," Jensen assured them. "My men intercepted him. The evidence is secure. Blackwood walked right into our trap." But as the lawmen secured the scene, a new dread settled in Ethan's gut. Blackwood was just the muscle. The mastermind, Mayor Crawford, was still out there. And as long as he was free, they would never be safe. The fight wasn't over. Dawn broke over a landscape of blood and rock. The marshals had cleared the dead, but the ghosts remained. "Crawford has disappeared," Marshal Jensen told them. "He's on the run. We need to get you to safety until he's caught." The plan was to take them to Fort Garrison under military escort, a week's journey south. Dr. Franklin would go with Jensen to testify. "Once Crawford is apprehended," he promised, "we can make permanent arrangements for these little ones." The words hung in the air. Permanent arrangements. The mission. A good family. Ethan looked at Daniel, asleep in his arms. He looked at Rachel, holding Emma. "You don't want to send them away," he said. "Do you?" she asked, her green eyes searching his. "No," he admitted, the word tearing from a place deep inside him. "I don't." The military escort arrived at noon, led by a young, capable officer named Captain Thornton. He promised them safe passage. The first few days were quiet. Daniel began to talk, simple words that sounded like miracles. Emma smiled more. For a moment, Ethan allowed himself to breathe. Then, on the third night, Thornton returned from a scout. His face was grim. "Tracks," he said. "A large group, a dozen riders, maybe more. They're following us." Crawford. They changed their route, heading into the treacherous Diablo Mountains. A storm rolled in, turning the trail to mud. And then, the worst possible thing happened. Daniel got sick. A cough, then a raging fever. They were trapped in the mountains, in a storm, with a sick child and a pack of killers on their trail. They found shelter in a cave. Rachel worked tirelessly, but Daniel's condition worsened. His breathing grew shallow and ragged. Ethan watched, helpless, the ghosts of his past rising to haunt him. He had lost his daughter, Sarah, to a fever just like this. He couldn't lose this boy, too. "You fight, Daniel," he whispered, holding the boy's hot little hand. Daniel's eyes fluttered open. "Pa," he breathed, the word a faint whisper. "Father." The word broke something open inside Ethan. "I'm here, son," he choked out. "I'm right here." In that moment he knew. This was his son. Emma was his daughter, and Rachel was his future, if they had one. The fever broke at dawn. Daniel was weak, but he would live. The fragile peace was shattered by a scout's warning. "Riders behind us! They're gaining!" Their desperate flight began anew. They raced down the mountain pass, Crawford's men closing in, bullets thudding into the sides of their wagon. They were outnumbered, outgunned. They made a stand in a cluster of boulders at the valley floor. The battle raged. The soldiers fought bravely, but they were falling. The situation was hopeless. Then Ethan saw him, Mayor Crawford, directing the assault. In a moment of pure rage, Crawford raised his rifle, aiming straight for Ethan. Time stopped. A single shot cracked through the chaos. Crawford staggered, a hole appearing in his chest, and collapsed. Ethan turned. Rachel stood there, her small revolver smoking in her hand. "He was going to kill you," she said simply. Just then, a bugle call echoed through the valley. The cavalry from Fort Garrison. A rider they'd sent for help had made it through. It was over. Truly over. As the soldiers secured the scene, Ethan gathered Rachel and the children into his arms. They were a strange sight. A battle-scarred man, a fierce woman, and two orphan children huddled together in the bloody aftermath. But Captain Thornton saw it differently. "You're a fortunate family," he said. Family. The words settled into Ethan's soul. "Ask me," Rachel whispered as they prepared to leave for the fort. "What?" "Ask me now, Ethan Colt." He looked at her, at the children, at the life he never thought he'd have again. "Rachel Walsh," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Will you build a life with me? A home for these children? A family?" Her answer was as clear and true as the sunrise breaking over the horizon. "Yes." 1 year later, a ranch house stood on a rise overlooking Silver Creek. Ethan Colt sat on the porch watching his son Daniel chase a butterfly. Rachel came out, their daughter Emma on her hip. She sat beside him, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly. Their new baby was due in the spring. The past was a part of them, a collection of scars that would never fully fade. But it no longer defined them. Their story was one of hope, of healing, of a family forged in the fires of the frontier who had found their way home. If you enjoyed this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of the untamed West.